Montana Territory, 1872. The mountains had turned their autumn gold, and the wind carried whispers of winter as it swept across the valley. Wade Forrester studied the tracks in the dried mud, his practiced eye noting the light impressions of a woman's boot heading eastward toward the cliff face that locals called Devil's Backbone. The 25-year-old cowboy straightened, adjusting his worn Stetson as he surveyed the rugged landscape before him. "Nobody rides out this way unless they're running from something," he muttered to himself, squinting against the late afternoon sun. His tall, lean frame cast a long shadow across the earth, and the breeze ruffled his sandy brown hair. 3 days of light stubble shadowed his otherwise youthful face, with eyes the color of a summer sky that had seen more hardship than most men twice his age. Wade had learned one truth since coming west after the war: a man survived longer keeping to himself. The frontier collected broken people, and he counted himself among them. Better to drive cattle, sleep under stars, and avoid entanglements. Connections meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got men killed in this untamed country. He'd buried enough friends to know that lesson by heart. Yet something about these tracks bothered him. They were fresh, maybe a day old, and belonged to someone traveling alone. Dangerous country for anyone, especially a woman. None of his business, he told himself. He had cattle to move before the passes filled with snow. Still, he found himself following the trail. The daughter of the recently deceased rancher, Sophia Vallens, had disappeared 3 days ago from her father's funeral. Some speculated she'd run off rather than face the creditors circling her father's once prosperous ranch like vultures. Wade had only glimpsed her from a distance, 20 years old with hair like wheat fields in summer sunshine, dressed in black mourning clothes that couldn't hide her natural grace. He'd heard the whispers about Old Man Vallens' debts and how his foreman, Curtis Blackwell, claimed to hold papers giving him rights to the property. Wade had worked for enough ranchers to know how these stories typically ended, especially for a young woman alone. Not my concern, Wade reminded himself, yet his horse continued following the tracks. The trail led toward a narrow passage in the cliff wall, a natural corridor barely visible until you were upon it. As Wade approached, he heard a sound that stopped him cold, the unmistakable click of a revolver hammer being pulled back. "That's far enough, cowboy." The voice was feminine but hard, like river stones polished smooth by the current. Wade raised his hands slowly, careful to make no sudden movements. "Meaning no harm, ma'am, just checking the trail." "My trail," the voice held steady. "Turn around and ride back the way you came." Instead, Wade slowly turned his head. She stood at the mouth of the passage, a Winchester rifle aimed at his chest. Her golden hair was tied back, and despite the men's trousers and work shirt she wore, there was no mistaking Sophia Vallens. Even with dirt smudging her face, her beauty struck him, high cheekbones, determined jaw, and eyes green as spring grass. "Miss Vallens," he said, recognition dawning. "Folks in town were wondering where you'd gone." "And who might you be to know my business?" Her rifle didn't waver. "Wade Forrester. I drive cattle for the Murphy outfit. Attended your father's funeral, though we never met properly." Something flickered across her face, grief perhaps, or wariness. "Well, Mr. Forrester, now you can go back and tell everyone you never found me." "Can't do that," Wade said quietly, the rifle steadied. "And why not?" "Because Blackwell's men are a half day behind me, and they're not looking to pay social calls." Fear flashed in her eyes, quickly replaced by determination. "I can handle Blackwell." Wade gestured to the narrow trail she'd left. "Not if he follows your tracks like I did." For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. She lowered the rifle slightly. "What do you want?" "Nothing. But I reckon you could use help covering those tracks before nightfall." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "Why would you help me?" Wade had no good answer. Helping her contradicted everything he believed about survival out here. But something in her fierce independence reminded him of himself, alone against forces too powerful to fight single-handed. "Let's just say I've got no love for men who steal land from rightful owners," he finally replied. The standoff lasted another minute before she lowered her rifle. "You can help erase the tracks, then you leave." As they worked backward along her trail, Wade learned Sophia had fled with what little remained of her father's possessions: deeds, family heirlooms, and the small amount of cash he'd hidden away. She suspected her father had been murdered, not taken by the fever as officially claimed. Blackwell was too eager to show those papers, she explained as they swept pine branches across the trail. Father would never have signed the ranch over to him. You think Blackwell forged your father's signature. I know it, determination flashed in her eyes. I just need to prove it. By nightfall, they'd obscured her trail back to where it met the main path. Wade knew he should leave as promised, return to the cattle drive waiting miles away. Instead, he found himself accepting her grudging invitation to make camp in the hidden canyon behind the cliff passage. The natural fortress surprised him, a small valley with grass, water, and enough space for the few animals she'd brought. She'd established a simple camp against one wall, sheltered from the elements. My father showed me this place when I was a child, Sophia explained as she prepared a small fire. Said it might save my life someday if trouble came. Smart man. He was, until Blackwell poisoned him with promises of wealth from the railroad coming through. Over a sparse meal, Sophia revealed how her father had begun acting strangely in his final months, secretive, anxious. After his death, Blackwell had appeared with papers giving him ownership of the Vallens ranch in exchange for debts owed. The signature looks similar but isn't father's, she said. And there's something else. She hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from her saddlebag. I found this hidden in his Bible. It mentions a claim near Devil's Backbone, this place, that father registered years ago. A silver claim. Wade studied the document. This would explain Blackwell's interest. If there's silver here, father never told me where, but I'm certain that's why Blackwell wants this land so desperately. That night, as they sat by the dying embers, Wade found himself sharing parts of his own story. The war that took his youth, the family farm lost to taxes while he fought, his years drifting west. He hadn't spoken so much about himself in years. So now you just drive cattle and avoid attachments, Sophia observed, wrapping her blanket tighter against the chill. It's safer that way. Safer, she repeated, but lonely. Wade couldn't argue with that truth. As he took first watch, watching her sleep in the firelight, he realized he was breaking his own rules by staying. He told himself it was just for the night. By morning, he'd return to the cattle drive where he belonged. But morning brought gunshots from the direction of the hidden entrance. Wade and Sophia scrambled to the lookout point to see 3 riders shooting at something in the brush below. Blackwell's men, Sophia whispered, but what are they shooting at? The answer came as an older man broke from the cover, running in a crouch toward the cliffs. A shot caught him in the leg, sending him sprawling. That's Henry, Sophia gasped, our old ranch hand. Before Wade could stop her, Sophia raised her rifle and fired at the pursuers, forcing them to take cover. Wade joined her with his revolver, creating enough distraction for the wounded man to drag himself toward the hidden passage. The brief firefight ended when the riders retreated, leaving Wade and Sophia to help the injured ranch hand into their sanctuary. After tending his wound, a clean shot through the meat of his thigh, Henry explained how he'd been searching for Sophia. They're saying you stole money and ran, Henry said, accepting a cup of coffee from Sophia. Blackwell's got the sheriff convinced you emptied your daddy's accounts before disappearing. That's a lie, Sophia said. Father barely had enough to keep the ranch running these past months. That ain't all, Henry continued grimly. They're saying you killed a man, one of Blackwell's new hands found dead the night you disappeared. Wade watched the color drain from Sophia's face. That's ridiculous, I never hurt anyone. Don't matter what's true anymore, Henry said. Blackwell's got people believing what he wants. There's a reward for information on your whereabouts. Wade realized he'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. The smart play was clear, leave now, forget he'd ever met Sophia Vallens, but watching her absorb this news with quiet dignity stirred something he thought long buried. The railroad survey, Henry continued. Your daddy found out something about it, that's when the trouble started. Sophia leaned forward, what about the survey? The lines coming through the north corner of your property and this land here. Henry gestured to the hidden valley. Your daddy was excited at first, talked about selling rights of way, then something changed. He started looking through old papers, staying up nights. The silver claim, Wade suggested. Henry nodded, and something else. Something about the original boundaries. He wouldn't tell me exactly, but he said Blackwell couldn't be allowed to see certain papers. Over the next days, as Henry recuperated, Wade found reasons to postpone his departure. He told himself it was because Sophia needed protection, that he couldn't leave her facing killers alone. But in the quiet moments, helping her hunt, watching her care for Henry, seeing her determination to reclaim her birthright, he recognized a deeper truth forming. Sophia wasn't just surviving, she was fighting for something meaningful. It made his own aimless existence seem hollow by comparison. On the fifth day, Wade caught Sophia studying a map her father had left, comparing it with landmarks visible from the cliff edge. "Father believed there was more than silver here," she admitted when Wade approached. "He said our family legacy was hidden in plain sight if only one knew how to look." Wade studied the crude map, noticing how certain features aligned with the valley. "These markings, they could be cave entrances." Together they explored the cliff walls, finding narrow openings that widened into natural chambers. In the third such cave, their lantern light revealed old mining tools and a journal wrapped in oilcloth. The journal, written by Sophia's grandfather, detailed the discovery of not just silver but a rich vein of gold, kept secret to avoid drawing attention during more lawless times. The final pages contained a devastating revelation. The original survey of the Vallens ranch had been deliberately falsified by the territorial surveyor, a business partner of Blackwell's father. "They've been trying to get our land for 2 generations," Sophia whispered, turning pages with trembling fingers. "Father must have discovered the truth and confronted Blackwell." "Which signed his death warrant," Wade concluded grimly. That night, as they discussed what to do with this information, Henry's condition suddenly worsened. Infection had set in. By morning, it was clear he needed a doctor or would die. "I'll take him to town," Wade volunteered. "It's too dangerous," Sophia argued. "Blackwell's men will be watching for any sign of me." "They're not looking for me," Wade countered. "I can get him to Doc Simmons and be back before anyone connects us." After reluctant agreement and careful planning, Wade departed with the feverish Henry. The journey to town passed uneventfully, but as Wade delivered Henry to the doctor's back door, he overheard men at the saloon discussing the expanded search for Sophia Vallens, now wanted for murder and theft. Worse, Wade recognized several hands from the Murphy outfit among those talking. His absence from the cattle drive hadn't gone unnoticed, and questions were being asked about his whereabouts. When he stopped at the general store for supplies, the proprietor studied him curiously. "Ain't you supposed to be with the Murphy herd heading to Billings?" "Taking some personal time," Wade answered vaguely. "Funny time for it." With all the excitement about the Vallens girl and that killing, the man leaned closer. "They're saying she might have had help, a tall cowboy nobody recognizes." Wade kept his expression neutral as he paid for his purchases. Outside, he noticed more glances than usual coming his way. His instincts screamed danger. Blackwell was casting a wide net, and Wade was becoming entangled. His return to the hidden valley was circuitous and careful, taking twice as long to ensure he wasn't followed. When he finally reached the secret entrance, he found it blocked by fresh rockfall, deliberately triggered, he suspected. "Sophia," he called softly, searching for another way in. A small shower of pebbles from above drew his attention. Sophia peered down from a narrow ledge 20 feet up. "This way, hurry." The alternative entrance required a precarious climb, but eventually led back to their camp. There, Sophia explained how riders had approached the main entrance that morning. "I collapsed it using the charges father had stored here," she said, eyes bright with tension. "They didn't get in, but they know this place exists now." Wade shared what he'd learned in town, the intensified search, the suspicions about an accomplice, Henry safely with the doctor. As night fell, they faced the reality that their sanctuary was compromised. "We need to leave," Wade said finally. "Take the journal and the claim papers to the federal marshal in Helena." "And then what?" Sophia challenged. "Even with proof, legal battles take years. Blackwell will have stripped everything of value from my ranch by then." "Better than dying in this hole," Wade argued. "Blackwell's not just some land grabber now, he's covering up murder." Their argument continued until exhaustion claimed them both. In the darkest hours before dawn, Wade woke to find Sophia gone from her bedroll. Alarmed, he searched the camp until he found her in the cave with the mining equipment, reading her grandfather's journal by lantern light. "There's another way out," she said without looking up. "A tunnel that comes out miles from here, beyond Blackwell's search area. Grandfather used it to transport gold without being followed." The tunnel, narrow and foreboding, had clearly not been used in decades. As they gathered essential supplies and prepared to leave, Wade confronted the truth he'd been avoiding. His concern for Sophia had become something deeper, something that terrified him more than Blackwell's gunmen. When their eyes met over the lantern flame, he saw the same recognition in her gaze. Neither spoke of it as they entered the dark passage, leading their horses through the cramped space that gradually widened as they descended through the mountain. Hours into their journey, the old timber supports began to groan ominously. Wade urged them forward, sensing danger. They had just reached a large chamber when the tunnel behind them collapsed with a thunderous roar, sending dust billowing around them. "Are you all right?" Wade coughed, finding Sophia in the darkness. "Yes, but we can't go back," she said, voice steady despite the close call. Their lantern revealed they'd entered a natural cavern with multiple passages. Grandfather's journal had mentioned markers to follow, but many had been destroyed by time and moisture. They chose what seemed the likeliest route, only to find themselves deeper in the mountain's labyrinth. As their lantern oil dwindled and their water ran low, Wade confronted the possibility they might die in these caves, all because he'd broken his rule about avoiding other people's troubles. Yet watching Sophia's determined face in the dim light, he couldn't regret finding her. For the first time in years, he felt connected to something beyond mere survival. "I was wrong," he said suddenly as they rested. "About the tunnel direction?" Sophia asked. "About everything." Wade stared into the darkness. "I told myself staying alone was about survival, but it was really about fear. Fear of losing someone else, like I lost my family." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "I understand that fear. When Mother died, I watched Father retreat into himself. He was physically present but gone in all the ways that mattered. I promised myself I'd never disappear like that." Their conversation was interrupted by a faint sound, running water. Following it led them to an underground stream that eventually opened into daylight through a crack barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, though they had to abandon their horses. They emerged miles from where they'd started, in a canyon Wade didn't recognize. As they climbed to higher ground to get their bearings, they spotted dust on the horizon, riders coming fast. "We can't outrun them on foot," Wade said grimly, checking his ammunition. Sophia pointed to a rocky outcropping. "We can make a stand there." The position offered some protection, with clear lines of sight in all directions. As they prepared for a fight, Sophia touched Wade's arm. "If we don't survive this," she began. Wade surprised himself by taking her hand. "We will." "But if we don't," she insisted, "I want you to know I'm glad you followed my tracks that day." The simple truth in her words struck deeper than any declaration of feelings could have. Wade realized that whatever happened, Sophia had already changed him irrevocably. The frontier might be merciless, but it had also brought him to her. As the riders drew closer, Wade made out the distinctive figure of Blackwell at the lead. 6 men accompanied him, all armed. "There they are," Blackwell's shout carried across the distance. Wade and Sophia exchanged a look before taking cover. The first shots pinged off the rocks around them as they returned fire judiciously, making each bullet count. 2 of Blackwell's men fell in the initial exchange, causing the others to retreat temporarily. "Vallens," Blackwell called out, "you're only making it worse for yourself. Surrender the papers and maybe you'll hang instead of bleeding out here." "You murdered my father," Sophia shouted back. "Your father was a fool who didn't recognize opportunity." Blackwell's voice held no denial. "That silver and the railroad route are worth 10 of his worthless ranch." Wade used the distraction to work his way around the side, hoping to flank their attackers. He'd almost reached position when a bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He scrambled behind a boulder as more shots kicked up dirt around him. From his new vantage point, he saw something that turned his blood cold, a second group of riders approaching from the east. Blackwell's reinforcements would trap them completely. But as the newcomers drew closer, Wade recognized the lead rider, Murphy himself, with several hands from the cattle drive. They'd followed his trail. The confusion that followed worked in Wade and Sophia's favor. Murphy, finding his cowhand pinned down by gunfire, immediately took Blackwell's group for bandits. The ensuing three-way firefight created enough chaos for Wade to make it back to Sophia's position. "We need to reach Murphy," he explained quickly. "He doesn't know what's happening, but he'll side with us if I can talk to him." Their desperate dash across open ground drew fire from Blackwell, but Murphy's men provided covering fire, assuming they were rescuing innocent travelers. When they finally reached the rancher's position, Wade quickly explained the situation. Murphy had no love for land grabbers and crooked officials. His stern face grew darker as Wade recounted Blackwell's crimes and Sophia's evidence. "I wondered why you disappeared from the drive," Murphy said. "Never took you for a man to abandon his post without good reason." The firefight intensified as Blackwell, realizing he faced superior numbers, grew desperate. A lucky shot struck Murphy in the chest, and Wade found himself in command of the rancher's men as they took cover behind rocks and saddles. "He's making a run for it," one of the cowboys shouted. Blackwell had indeed broken from his dwindling group, riding hard toward the cliff edge, the very precipice that locals called Devil's Backbone. Wade and Sophia pursued on borrowed horses, gaining ground on the heavier man. The chase ended at the cliff's edge, where Blackwell found himself trapped between a sheer drop and his pursuers. Cornered, he turned with pistol raised. "Stay back," he warned. "I'll take you both with me." Wade positioned himself in front of Sophia. "It's over, Blackwell. Murphy's men have your hired guns. The marshal will hear everything." "On whose testimony?" Blackwell sneered. "A murdering woman and her drifter lover. Who do you think they'll believe, you or me?" "They'll believe this," Sophia said, producing her father's journal. "My grandfather's account of your family's first attempt to steal our land. My father's notes about discovering your fraud, the real boundaries that prove you've been mining illegally for years." Blackwell's face contorted with rage. He fired wildly, his shot going wide as Wade tackled Sophia to safety. When they looked up, Blackwell was gone. Whether he'd fallen or jumped remained uncertain. All that remained was the echo of loose stones cascading down the cliff face. In the aftermath, with Murphy's wound treated and Blackwell's surviving men taken into custody, Wade and Sophia stood at the cliff edge where their enemy had disappeared. "It doesn't seem real," Sophia said quietly, "that it's over." "Not quite over," Wade replied. "There's still your ranch to reclaim, the mine to register properly." "Our mine," she corrected, then hesitated. "Unless you're planning to move on with the next herd." The question hung between them, weighted with all they'd experienced together. Wade looked out across the vast landscape that had been his home and refuge for so long. The endless horizon had once represented freedom to him, the ability to leave everything behind. Now, looking at the woman beside him, he saw something different in that same view: possibility, future, roots. "I think I'm done drifting," he said finally, taking her hand, "if you'll have me." Sophia's smile dawned slowly, like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I followed your tracks too, you know, from the moment you found me at the cliff. I was watching to see if you'd run when things got difficult." And you never did," she faced him fully. "That's all I needed to know." 3 months later, Wade stood on the porch of the rebuilt Vallens ranch house, watching as workers constructed new outbuildings. The territorial court had moved swiftly once presented with the journal and other evidence. Blackwell's body had eventually been recovered, along with documents in his saddlebags that further proved his crimes. Inside, Sophia was meeting with railroad representatives about the right-of-way agreement, negotiating terms that would bring prosperity without surrendering control of the land her family had fought to keep. The silver mine was operating legally now, providing funds for the ranch's expansion. Murphy had recovered from his wound and offered Wade a partnership managing a new herd, but for the first time in his life, Wade had declined steady work. His place was here now, building something permanent. As Sophia emerged from the house, satisfaction evident in her expression, Wade felt the last of his old beliefs fall away. The frontier wasn't just about survival, it was about creating something worth surviving for. "Good news?" he asked as she joined him. "Very good, they've agreed to our terms, including the station location." She leaned against him, fitting perfectly against his side. "Father would be proud." Wade thought about the journey that had brought them here, from tracks in the dirt to a truth revealed at a cliff's edge. How following those tracks had led him not just to Sophia, but to himself. "I asked Reverend Turner to come by next Sunday," he said casually, though his heart pounded like a stampeding herd. Sophia looked up, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Any particular reason?" "Thought we might need him for a wedding. If you're agreeable." Her answer came not in words but in the way she reached for him, as certain as the sunrise. Later they would plan and prepare, send for Henry to attend, invite Murphy and his men. But in that moment, with the future stretching before them like an uncharted frontier, they had everything they needed. The cowboy who had followed tracks seeking only truth had found something far more valuable: a love strong enough to survive the wild country and a home worth fighting for.